Sorry for the fiddly start. We ready?
Are we ready?
All right.
We doing this? All right. Our good luck ritual. We open the beers on camera every time.
I'm doing the Radlburger Pilsner. Are you all traditional?
I am going old school Guinness Extra Stout.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with a Guinness Extra Stout.
And I'm doing the refresh water.
I would expect nothing less from anyone running for office. And very special welcome to Tom Hain, running for Sheriff of Midland County.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. I got to start off by saying I am completely honored that you asked to be on our podcast, considering the content that we normally do.
Conspiracy theories, movie reviews, music, do all kinds of weird geeky things like rocketry and
astronomy,
astronomy. Yeah, exactly.
And my last episode, it should be coming out soon. It took a lot of editing. It's two artists. I had John Capadonna and Mike Montalvo in here.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. I got to switch my brain from artist to cop. So how we put this board together, I worked for the sheriff's office for 21 years. I did everything. I began as a clerk in the jail when I was in college, went on to become a jailer, went to the academy, was on patrol, became a detective eventually, and we call them investigators at the sheriff's office. So the same thing. Was a sergeant over sex crimes unit. I think I did a total of 15 years on SWAT, beginning in the 90s sometime, whenever that kicked off. And then I did my last 5 as the SWAT commander. And then I went to the DA's office for 7 years, and I had to retire due to health. And so here we are. I'm a podcaster. Tim, one of my best friends, we're musicians. He's also a brewmaster and former law enforcement, radio talk show, ditch digger.
I've lived 1,000 lives.
Boomerang thrower.
Worked in advertising, multimedia development, music, art, beer brewing. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So we cross paths. You're the chief of the UTPB Police.
Yes, sir.
Right?
12 years now.
12 years, man, that's crazy. It just made me feel old after that. We've crossed professional paths a few times. We had to ask your permission to do anything, and you guys did a few solids for us because of your jurisdiction. Also, random memory came up. One of you guys really saved my bacon on a traffic stop out on 191. I got into a bind with a guy, and we were short. You know, Midland County is 900 and change square miles.
Yeah, it's
something
big.
like that. Yeah, and man, my help was a long way off, and one of your guys came by and kind of scooped me up. I was in a fight, so and I wish I could remember his name. I know it's written down somewhere, but so everybody understands that college police are police just like the rest of us, like everyone else.
Right,
that's the most important thing.
A lot of people don't realize it, but we're considered state police officers. We have jurisdiction anywhere. UT system owns land, has classes. UT lands is part of the UT system.
Oh, yeah.
So I went cave exploring on UT lands last weekend, and there's a lot of formalities, to make sure you have permission to be there and all of that. So those state police are responsible for. In fact, we had a little conversation about that.
How big is your department now?
We have 22 sworn police officers positions, 5 public safety officers, and we have our own 24-hour-a-day dispatch. So we've got 6 people in there.
Oh, fantastic! When did you guys start with your own dispatch? That's fairly recent, right?
No. When I started in 2008, we already had our own dispatch. So probably for the last 15, 16 years at least.
Okay. I remember some problems when they were doing the mutual aid and all those channels, trying to get everybody to jive and talk together was kind of weird.
Talking about mutual aid in radios, UTPB became heavily involved in the active shooter incident on August 31st.
That's right. I remember that, yeah.
Right. We called all of our folks out. We, of course, had the first few officers man the campus, and then we deployed officers out to the scenes. One of the problems that we had was the radio system.
Yeah.
Everyone in Ector County could communicate and talk to each other. Midland PD's on their own little island, and Midland SO's on their own little island, and they can't talk to each other, and they can't talk to anyone in in Odessa. So up and down 191, you kind of saw people going different directions because the information was delayed. So if I'm elected sheriff of Midland County, one of the first things that I want to start working on is getting us onto a regional system where we can all talk to each other.
Fantastic.
And, you know, in the older days, and I've been doing this since the early 80s, everyone wanted their own little island. I want my own jail, my own communication center. We don't want to share information. And over the years, law enforcement's grown, matured, and become educated, and we know we've got to work together. And I'm confident that folks here in Midland with the city will be open to discussing going to some kind of a system where we can all talk together. I really highly recommend the regional system that Odessa's on. It's an 800 trunking system. Everyone in Ector County, no matter what department it is, we can talk to each other.
I remember reading about that because I know SO's on a kind of a different animal. I think they just expanded. Because we had a lot of trouble with that even into my DA office days with range and coverage on that. And there were my problem was, although there were some ways to talk with other agencies and deal with them and monitor and all that, I never could remember how to do it. It got so complicated
Right.
and so crazy.
Yeah.
And then in the SWAT days and the critical incidents, inevitably we wound up with sticking one guy with comms with all the other agencies, and we were on our encrypted SWAT channel. It was always crazy. And one of the things that I don't hear people mention enough about places like Midland, and you and I spoke about this before, was that when we had a large, well-equipped SWAT team, and a lot of places around us don't. Small towns, Stanton, Rankin,
Right.
places like that, and you wind up being responsible for an even larger area than you do. And I remember you made some comment about being ready for that and helping out the smaller communities.
Yes, sir. I totally believe it's all in partnerships and working together, because if we share information, we share our people, and we share our resources, it saves the taxpayers money no matter what county you're in.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah. It's all nice when people play together.
Yeah. And increases efficiency. It's funny you mentioned the sort of limitations in communications the day of that shooting. I had a friend who was out and about that day, and he said, I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it was really, really bad because I saw one group of law enforcement vehicles, emergency vehicles, running hot in one direction, and they literally passed another group doing the exact same thing in the opposite direction.
Right. Some of the Midland County folks had been given a vehicle description, and they thought they had located the vehicle at one point,
Okay.
and were on 191. They'd been over towards Odessa, and were on 191 back eastbound trying to catch up to that vehicle, which was not involved in the incident.
Wow.
Had we not had the delay in communications, some of those
That
things
might
wouldn't
not
have
have
happened.
happened. Yeah, exactly.
I had just retired, and I heard that was the first thing I'd listened to on police radios when I didn't have a police radio. So I'm on I can't remember. It's big in ham radio where you can listen to different public service on the internet.
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of that site?
Yeah, Broadcastify is one of
Yeah,
them.
there's another one. It
Yeah.
wasn't on that. But anyway, I remember listening to that and just hearing the communications mess and not really, just trying to get a picture. Now this is with, I'm not in a car. I'm just sitting and listening. I have no other responsibilities other than to do that. I had a clear head. I wasn't on chemo at the time, and I'm trying to picture it all in my head, and I couldn't make sense of it. I sort of knew what was going on here and there,
Right.
but you could tell guys were just all over. The Odessa Fire seemed to have the best grip on communications. I don't know if that's just because of their scope of the incident or if it was just better for them. But you're exactly right, Tom. That's been an issue for a long time, getting people to just play
Right.
nice together with radio.
And it's a simple fix. It's not something that's extremely expensive or out of the realm of what's available technology-wise. You could get a group of ham radio operators together, and they could put together a repeater system that can do 100 different things just through how it's programmed. So
Right.
Is Tex Law still a thing? That Tex Law channel?
It's still there.
How well is that working now?
That's one of those things that I think a lot of the younger officers get confused with how to get to those back channels, especially in an emergency when the adrenaline's running and
Yeah.
you tend to get the tunnel vision.
For anybody that doesn't know, Tex Law was a channel that was supposed to be on every somehow accessible by all law enforcement in Texas, and it was kind of hit or miss. And then it wasn't encrypted. That was another thing.
Right.
That was a big issue.
Right. And on this 800 trunking system, all those frequencies channels are encrypted. So people with scanners, if this bad guy potentially had a scanner, he would not have been able to hear what was going, at least on the Odessa end of it.
Right on.
And that's a hazard to the officers and to the public. I know a lot of the public love to listen to the police radio.
Yeah.
But if you've got a bad guy out there running around with a police scanner and he can hear what we're doing and where we're at, that's not a good thing.
That didn't hit me until well, actually it did. We got into a really bad scrape. It was a SWAT thing, and we caught the guy and looked at his cell phone, and he had one of those apps open where you could hear the radio. Now, we were encrypted. You couldn't. And it was only we were talking to a dispatcher on the phone, and we had several SWAT vehicles, and we were all on our encrypted point-to-point channel, so that was a good thing. But we were talking numbers before we got here. I was 28 years in law enforcement, and you said you're 36?
This is my 36th year.
So kind of give me a rundown. I'm pretty familiar with your resume, but not everybody else is.
Well, I started out in Big Spring, Texas. I grew up there and graduated high school, went to work for the Big Spring Police Department in 1984. I attended the academy, the regional academy here in Midland.
What class were you in regional?
Now, I couldn't answer that question.
President of 50th.
Hey,
right
there
here.
you go.
Yes, sir.
That's good. But went through the academy there with Sheriff Parker, that's Stan Parker. He's sheriff in Howard County. He and I went to the academy together. And I spent the first, 8.5 to 9 years of my career in Big Spring. Worked in CID, worked in patrol, trained people. When I first started, it seems like we're always critically short of police officers in the West Texas area. I'd been there 3 months when I started training people. Been on my own for 3 months and started training people. So for the majority of my career, I've had a kind of a authority leadership role, because you know as well as I do, when you're training new officers, that's a really important part of the department. Yeah. And I always enjoyed doing that, and trained the sheriff in Martin County, Brad Ingram.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I remember him.
Worked with the police chief over there too, Joe Bob Morales.
Oh yeah. I was amazed. This is again, it was back in my patrol days when the new intermediate classes were coming around, and we go to Big Spring. So here the guys from the big city of Midland come strutting into a little old Big Spring, right? And a couple of their narcotics guys were teaching, I don't know, something on the. I don't remember, something we were required for our intermediate deal, search and seizure or something like that. And those guys got to telling war stories, and I thought, oh my God, man, what is going on there? Because those guys had seen it. And I remember one of them saying, we were talking about it was search warrants, because the topic of informants came up in informant registry. And one of those guys said, we have to be careful about that, because if we burn an informant, he's dead in a half hour.
Right.
In Big Spring.
Just, yeah.
Well, the strange thing about Big Spring is when McMahon closed, the air base closed, the town kind of freaked out a little bit. They got scared. Our economy is taking a huge hit. What can we do to sort of diversify the economy and guarantee that some of these civilian jobs that were on base and all of the stuff around that, we don't lose that economic power. And so somebody had the idea of bringing in the prison system, which in and of itself, I mean, you got to have prisons and good officers and all that. But I think one of the unintended consequences of bringing private and federal prisons to the Big Spring area is that when you bring bad people for a long stay, their families tend to follow, and they tend also maybe not to be, the highest stock of citizenry.
I see a nod from our Big Spring vet over here. Yeah.
And so it makes the job of law enforcement in that environment, I can only imagine, several fold more difficult just for those reasons.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you've had to step up to leadership quite a bit, is what I'm hearing, and what I've heard from other people. So what did you do after Big Spring?
I went to Odessa PD from there, and worked patrol, and the chief there at the time was very community-oriented. I would say he was probably ahead of his time with community relations.
Was it Jenkins at
Yes,
the time?
James Jenkins. So I'd been there 8 months, and they moved me into community relations. That's part of the reason I left Odessa, is we never could quite get over the hurdle of having enough people to have a community relations. And I was fond of the DARE program, and I really wanted to teach DARE. And another officer and I started the DARE program in Odessa back in about 1993. And wonderful program. I did it in several of the schools there till about 1996. And great program. Enjoyed working with the students and the parents there. And unfortunately, DARE's disappeared a little bit over the years.
Yeah, that's been weird. I was a sergeant over, and I think maybe you'll have more insight on this. It got to the point where they were just trying to poke DARE wherever they could. Nobody knew where it belonged. Right. And when I became a sergeant, I took over a unit that was working all the juvenile crimes. So they connected any juvenile program with them. But then we were taking in a huge number of sex crimes to the point we all had to become sex crime specialists. So then we absorbed sex crimes, juvenile crimes, offenders, and victims. So DARE winds up to one guy that's got to carry 2 loads, and then he picks up a bigger load in the summer and all that. So I see where that program's kind of been weird. Is it still set up kind of where one officer can work 6 or 8 schools? Is it still that way?
Right. It's you spend a semester in. Typically, you pick 4 schools. You do it Monday through Thursday. You leave yourself a free day on Friday, and you spend that whole semester in that group of schools. Next semester, you go to another 4 schools. So with 2 of us doing that in Odessa, we could cover 16 schools a year. And at that time, they had 26 elementary schools. And then the next year, we'd cover the schools we didn't get.
That's going to lead me to a question that I want to ask, and something I want everyone here to understand. Everyone at this table has had years of contact with our former sheriff, Gary Painter. He gave me my break in law enforcement. I miss him. I had considered him a friend on top of a boss. He was behind me. He took care of us, took care of my crew, which is the most valuable thing to me. No one at this table holds any disrespect or anything
I think
like that.
We all held him in the highest regard. He was a brother Freemason to you and I.
He was at my raising.
He was at your raising, and so he's an important guy to all of us at this table.
So what I'm saying is we're gonna talk about changes at the sheriff's office and the administration that's going to happen, and I want people to understand that this is in no way in disrespect to the late Sheriff Painter. The way I look at it, when I walked away, when I left after running a unit in a SWAT team, there were a lot of holes filled that I left, things that I wasn't doing right, and I saw filled. But how do you have any ideas or plans or changes for things like DARE, for task forces and stuff that the sheriff's involved in, sheriff's office is involved in?
First, let me say this, Matt. Gary was a neighbor, lived a couple of houses down from me, and I considered him a friend. One of the county officials that I was in a meeting with here a few weeks ago asked me, what would Gary say if he knew you were going to run for sheriff? And I said, if he could come down and sit at the table with us, I truly, really believe he would say, Tom, if you want to be the Midland County Sheriff, you run for sheriff. Yep. And I think he would encourage anyone to do that.
Yep.
And
I've heard conversations about that, and
that makes total sense to me. You know, Gary was reluctant to run for sheriff himself back in the mid '80s when he first ran, and he took a lot of encouraging to do it. And they were like, he had the right people behind him. He said, "Look, we will help you do this. You're the right guy for this." And I think so. I think he always kind of had that attitude about it, about the nature of the office and the nature of running for the office. So
yeah, I don't hear any major shift in ideology from him to you. So,
right.
But I was curious about that. I know there are a lot of task force opportunities and different things going on. I was kind of curious about your input on those.
You know, first of all, I know they have a sergeant that still does the DARE program.
Yes.
I've talked to him, and I think he's really concerned that they may go another direction other than DARE. They keep assigning and piling on other duties onto him, which technically you shouldn't do that. You should let this officer, number one, the DARE program comes first. In my mind, DARE in any community relation program that we can get that reaches out to the young people, I'm in favor of. As long as it's a respected program, it's established. The young people today are our leaders tomorrow. And I think for law enforcement to have a good rapport with them is very important. As far as the task force, I think we need to look at deployment all across the sheriff's office, CID, the jail, patrol. I know there are times that there are 2 people on patrol in Midland County.
Still.
That
was the thing when I was there, yeah.
Yes, sir, to cover 900 and some odd square miles. That's not good for the community. That's a safety issue for the community, and it's certainly an officer safety issue. One domestic, you should send 2 deputies.
Yep.
That wipes out your entire shift. So if there's a major accident or there's a robbery or anything anywhere else, you're going to have to either clear one of those people or wait till they can both of them safely leave together. That's if you don't make an arrest.
Yeah.
So I have huge issues with that. I think we need to look at the deployment across the department and see what we can do to possibly redeploy personnel onto patrol in safe numbers, but not cost the taxpayers any more money.
I left patrol in 2005, but we had 2 districts and often 2 or 3 officers, and it always frustrated me because that's been the system since I was an explorer in the 80s.
Well, let me lay this on you. How much has Midland County grown since 2005?
Oh my gosh.
Just look at.
Well, yeah, and so we experienced that even at the time, and what concerned me was thinking beyond just what you're saying about 2 officers for a call like that, and giving priority to person's calls over property calls and all like that. There is also the problem. I started my stopwatch one time just out of curiosity. We got a hot call. Don't remember what it was, but I remember the number. I ran hot for 21 minutes, and it was peak traffic time from one end of the county to the other to help with a 2-officer call. So the more mile time, the more windshield time you put on an officer, that risk level goes up. So you have to look at
and running hots, lights, and siren.
Oh yeah, lights and siren. I had one of the first 03 Interceptors when they came out, and that was the only new car I ever had at the sheriff's office.
And he wore it out.
Oh, I miss those cars. I love.
He
driving
loved
Interceptors.
it. He still talks about that car with great affinity.
Oh, outturn a Mustang. Couldn't beat him in a straight line, but I've caught Mustangs just because that car turned better. I caught a motorcycle once. Yeah, clocked him at 180, and the car wouldn't go that fast, but it would turn that fast. But the way I see it, and what I want your opinion on, isn't it about time we looked at response time based on population, based on call density, based on I forget what they call it, but essentially your drive time, like you would a job. Do I have to cross Big Spring at 5 o'clock and all like that, and maybe chop our districts up a little bit?
I believe so. For the last 5 days, I've been out with folks that are helping me put the campaign signs out. And my brother asked me yesterday afternoon, while we've been in, I put probably at least half, if not 3/4 of my signs in Midland County, the county itself.
Right.
Because, yes, you represent the people in the city, and that's where a lot of the voters are, but the sheriff's office represents the folks in the county. And truly, I had seen one deputy on 307.
Yeah, that was huge.
And we've seen, as we've been beside the highways, of course, I've been talking to people and I hear complaints and things, but just being out beside the highways dropping these signs, the speeders, and the people that we've seen skirt through red lights or stop signs and things, it's not the guy's fault that they're not out there being seen. They're busy. The
Right.
population's grown. The numbers in patrol haven't grown for the most part. And they're busy. There's no time for proactive patrol. There's no time to work traffic.
Everything's reactive. Yeah.
Exactly. They're waiting for the call, and then they go answer the call.
Yeah. We used to get handed selective enforcement and patrol buys and things of that nature, and through no ill will, that all became secondary. I would like to share a quick war story, and I want to get back to you. It was I believe it was Al Chitwood, who retired from Lower Colorado River Authority. He was a patrolman with me, and we had gotten a couple of calls. I believe it came through the sheriff, and they said, "Hey, go watch this road." And I forget what road it was. It was out in Greenwood, and it was this constant drag strip. And he set up, and in fact, it was so bad we kind of divvied up his patrol, and so he could go run that. And there were enough of us that day, and he wrote a handful of tickets. And he was sitting. He returned back to his hide, and he was waiting for the next guy. And a bunch of citizens that lived in the area started coming toward him, and he thought, "Oh man, this is going to get rough." And they brought him cornbread or something, some kind of baked goods and a couple of Cokes. And I go, "Man, we appreciate you being out here." So yeah, it's a huge thing. And the response time, the windshield time, that all has so much to do with your efficiency, and it was frustrating not to be able to do that because of what we faced.
Then you find officers taking unnecessary risk when they're having to cover a great deal of area.
Yeah.
Just like the deputy that was hit by the train, lucky to be alive.
Yeah,
Right.
Very lucky. Yeah, and I remember that. It's so frustrating to be out behind the airport. But when I say behind, between Ector and the airport, you're in that area, and somebody just suddenly have problems with a traffic stop in Greenwood.
Well, and regarding that call in particular that deputy was responding to, if I recall correctly, it involved a child in danger. And so as if you're not amped up enough going to any kind of a call of that nature, when a child's involved, you're even more invested in getting to that call as quickly as possible, and your risk of, and when you have to go that far that fast, the risk of something bad
especially
happens.
with our traffic now. It's worse than when I was a patrolman. It's terrible.
And I would also imagine that in this day and age, all the RV parks that you see out in these rural areas, and they just pop up, they're like pop-up RV parks, and they're everywhere. I would imagine that, I don't have any numbers, but I would imagine that the number of disturbances that have to be responded to in those RV parks are probably comparable to in the rural areas or even some of the in-town areas. And when you have that much of a shortage of officers with that much more people out there, the stress level and the anticipation of bad things happening just at the beginning of a shift in an officer's mind have got to be much more present.
Right. And one of the problems that I see, we've got all these folks from here that don't belong here. Mm-hmm. Some of them are really good people. Some of them are here to make money and have a good time.
A lot of them.
Yep.
I would say, my opinion.
Exactly. And, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, beer 30 when the bars close, and they're going back to these fifth wheel trailers and what have you, lots of disturbance calls at them, and really dangerous because they don't have a great deal of regard for the community, law enforcement, their neighbors. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
that's one thing that, and I, just being a lifelong West Texan, I have a tremendous love for this area where I live, and that's a difficult pill to swallow, even for somebody who's a civilian who's not in law enforcement, to see people who treat the community and treat the area that way. They look at it from they're from just a sort of a use it up point of view. We're here to make money and we pass the time in whatever way we can, we can. And so,
we saw that at the DA's office, especially people would come in for the oil industry and get a DWI, which would be like their fifth. We would have to go through all the other states they lived in. And then as soon as it's gone, they've lost their oil field job. Now we have to go find them, and poof, they're gone.
Yeah.
Or witnesses. Same thing. We had one. I remember I had one bar fight that I worked as an investigator that was a result of resulted in a felony level assault. Mm-hmm. And there were people from 6 different states in there at one time. And that's not something we've ever experienced before. But I got to apologize. Tim and I both have the attention span of a parakeet. We left off with your resume at Odessa.
Yes, sir.
And now, what did you do to Odessa? And let's finish that up, because I was really impressed reading your bio, and I apologize for taking away from. We're just like that. If you mention a war story,
anytime Matt tells a war story, we're off the rails.
Yeah, most guys get up and go to the bathroom when I start talking. Right. But and I wanted to mention one of the reasons that I blame all of my mental issues and shortcomings on my big brother and Troy Joyner were best friends. So if you see character flaws in me and you think, why is this guy so weird? Just imagine being a 5-year-old around those 2 guys when they were in high school.
There you go. Troy
Joyner was a longtime officer at OPD. He watches the podcast. Hi, Troy. You still broke my airplane. I don't care what you say. My little toy airplane. But so Odessa PD is where we left off.
Yes, sir. I ended up moving over to the school district police department as they started growing. And community relations started phasing out a little bit at the city, and I went over there and did DARE and did the GREAT program. At the same time, on the side, I kind of have a little confession to make. Back in the Mike and Dana days, I DJ'd over there too.
Oh, wow. So that explains
KG 100.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember that.
KG 100.
I was just commenting on your mic tone too. That works out just right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, between DARE and all the talking there and DJing on the side and getting older, I've kind of worn my voice out a little bit. But
it sounds great. I came off of, I was just complaining. I came off of chemo, which chews your voice up, and I was so excited to do the artist podcast. It went an hour and a half with these 2 friends of mine, and
both excellent artists.
Yeah, they're both great artists, and apparently I got a sinus infection that then turned into SARS or bird flu or something. I missed a hunting trip. I was so glad the doctors gave me a break. I was going to catch that last weekend of Nolan County extended season, and I couldn't make a sound, and I was miserable. But what now? So we did OPD and then the school system.
Yes, sir.
How big is the Odessa department, or was it at the time?
At the time, they were close to around 260 police officers.
Wow. I remember hearing about how they blew up. That's crazy. And so is that when you went to UT? Was after that? Or was there something
Actually, after the school district, I went to Reagan County Sheriff's Office.
All right.
At the time, I worked for the second youngest sheriff in the state of Texas.
What was that sheriff's name?
Kurt Pulley.
Kurt, okay. And the one before him?
Frank Gonzalez.
Okay. I appreciate that. I had met both of them at one time.
He actually went by Efren.
Yep, I remember that. Those are good. If those would be jobs. Those are the kind of things I was looking at doing if my career were to be longer. Was places like Reagan County. It seems like a great place to be a cop.
It was. They were behind in the times at the time I was there, and we kind of drug them forward into the 20th century at the time. So.
Yeah, I've seen them go kicking and screaming like that.
Yes.
Yeah. I've had so many of those conversations because I'm a tech guy, and that's one thing I will forever be grateful to Gary Painter for. Was he did not shy away from technology and what we did. I mean, we would pitch some crazy stuff at him, and we had a very powerful, when I was there, I'm sure it still is, forensics unit, a lot of resources. But
at the time I was there, we had, probably 12, 14 peace officers. And I had signed up to help Booger Pruitt.
Yeah.
Over in Garden City, Glasscock County, when they had the festival out at St. Lawrence, the German sausage festival every
year.
And went over with a guy named Jeff Garner, who was a sergeant at the time and is the sheriff there now.
Yep.
And we just pulled in the parking lot, and my phone rang, and it was Sheriff Pulley. And he was a prankster. So I answered the phone. He says, "We need you to come back." And I says, "Oh, really?" "Yes, sir. We need to get back here immediately." I'm thinking he's playing, and I said, "Well, we just pulled up in the parking lot. You know, I'm helping the sheriff's office in Glasscock County with this festival." He says, "Well, we've had a murder." And
What?
I said, okay. I said, what happened? He says, well, somebody got stabbed at a family gathering and person's deceased. And I said, okay. Still thinking he's joking. He says, Tom, none of us have ever worked a murder before. You're the only one here that's ever worked a murder. This is real. I need you to come back.
Right.
So I did and went back, and we worked that murder. But
wow.
the first murder they had over there in years.
Wow.
So a young force at the time, and
well, kind of speaking of that, experience-wise, and just sort of speaking to what you know how to do and things that you know that you may kind of hang on your hat as proud moments. What are you most proud of in your years with the UT system, like accomplishments that you and your team, and then how would you adapt that to your vision of being the Midland County Sheriff?
Well, from Reagan County, I went to Page, Arizona, and was chief there for 5 years. And I do want to come back to Page because I had a unique thing happen on day 3 that I was there that I think kind of speaks to my integrity. But at UTPB, when I arrived there were 2 police officers left standing.
Wow.
They had been 9 months with no police chief. The chief prior to me had gone on and was assistant director for UT system in Austin, and they'd been stuck with interim chiefs for 9 months. Mm-hmm. 2 police officers left standing, 2 police cars, one of which, if you drove more than 20 minutes, the lights flashed on and off. So it had electrical problems. You couldn't drive it at night.
Matt can relate.
Yeah.
We had positions for 9 people and had 2. One of those we had to terminate shortly after I got there, and the other one resigned. And he was going to be under investigation.
That's quite telling. Yeah.
They had a terrible, for especially the OPD officers back in the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, UTPB police tended to have a terrible reputation. They paid those guys $26,000, $27,000, $28,000 a year. You get what you pay for. Remember that.
Yeah.
So they were hiring people nobody else wanted. They occasionally got a good officer, but for the most part, had people nobody else wanted with our college kids. Mm-hmm. And
wow.
So we went through a lot the first year to 2 years I was there. David Watts was the president at the time. It really took a lot of effort, a lot of convincing to raise that salary, because people look and think, you're not being shot at every night. You're not going call to call. And sometimes they just have trouble paying those officers what other people are making. So I convinced him. We drugged that salary up from $28,000 a year to $46,000 a year and filled those 9 positions. And over the years, he's retired. We've got a new president, Dr. Woodley, now, and we've got a take-home program. So every officer we have has a take-home vehicle. That was very instrumental on August 31st when we had the active shooter. These people
absolutely
deployed.
Yeah.
They deployed from their homes to wherever we needed them at, a scene or at the university. They've got their equipment with them. They've got their guns with long guns, rifle, shotgun. We've got positions for 22 folks now. We've got the respect of the law enforcement agencies around us.
Very much, yeah.
And, talking while campaigning for sheriff, talking to some of the JPs and the district attorney folks and county attorney folks, we've gained the respect of these folks. We present good cases. We write good tickets. We've got a good group of officers working for us, and I consider the magnitude of the hard work the officers put in. We help these other agencies. We get involved in the community, like August 31st, New Year's Eve, 4th of July, when they do special task force to go out and police these parties or underage drinking like graduation. Mm-hmm. We always contribute officers to the city and the county to help make that happen.
Yeah.
That's
great.
I really appreciate what you said there. in my time as a cop, as brief as it's been, for 28 years seems really brief. I saw the change from the deputy with a badge and a gun all the way to everybody has to be a little bit of SWAT. Mm-hmm. I saw that transition. I very much appreciate and thank you for bringing the department to those standards, because even in this day and age, I have trouble convincing people how real that is in other agencies. And I'm amazed that there are still agencies that are in the pre-Columbine days of hold up and wait for SWAT.
Yeah. Right.
And I can tell you right now how long it takes to spin a SWAT team up.
Just my observation from the outside looking in, just regarding that very thing. Just since the unfortunate events of the Odessa shooting, the philosophies have begun to change where maybe they weren't before. Like, everybody realizes, even people who just daily, citizens of Midland, Odessa realize, okay, this is, you kind of need to have your head on a swivel. And I would imagine that policies were modified and changed, and a lot of stuff happened after that shooting just to, Also, this is something Matt and I have talked about, and I don't know if you've considered this or what conversations you might have had. Is that the first case ever in United States history of a rolling mass shooter? I couldn't think of another one.
Yeah. They had the situation in California that some people compared to this, but it was a lot different, where the couple shot up the place where they had worked, and then the SWAT team caught them like 2 miles away in the vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
A lot different. Some people I've heard compare this, but this was totally different. There were, I can't believe that I'm fading on this, but I believe it was 16 different crime scenes.
Yeah.
Right.
And it covered over 30 miles.
Yeah.
And that was huge.
Completely unique. A black swan event in every way.
We talked about that. I mean, we used to sit in rooms writing scenarios. One of the things we would do was trade with other SWAT teams and other units and come up with scenarios. And we literally never dreamed of that one.
Mm-hmm. So I want to get back to the Arizona thing. I want to hear the Arizona story, and then we can pick back up with your history moving into the present.
There you go. On my third day at the Page Police Department in Arizona, and that was a community, the full-time population was around 10 to 12,000 people, but Lake Powell's there. I've got canyons, mountains, 2 hours north of Flagstaff.
Oh, beautiful.
3 hours from the Utah state line.
High country Arizona.
Yes. So for about 9 months out of the year, our population was really 50 to 60,000 people with the tourists there. So day 3 that I'm there, I've called a department meeting with all the staff, and I'm at the front of the classroom kind of talking about my visions and the direction and introducing these folks to me. And a communications manager from dispatch comes to the door, waves out a lieutenant. He goes out 2-3 minutes. He comes back. He waves out another lieutenant who comes to the door and waves out two. Now I'm starting to get upset. I'm thinking, this is the new police chief here, and we're, everyone's been disrupted because now everyone's kind of watching the door. Something's going on. So they come call me out, and the lieutenant over patrol says, "We've got a problem." Okay, what is it? Well, the former police chief, who left in a hell of gunfire, has barricaded himself in his house with 2 city council people. And I'm like, how did this happen?
Wow.
Well, he'd been at the grocery store, and like I said, he left in a hell of a gunfire, and he'd not seen the paper. And the person in front of him made a joke that he doesn't have a job. You probably shouldn't take his check to the clerk. Didn't help things. And then throws down a newspaper that the headlines are something to the effect that he'd had an affair with 2 of the females within the department.
Oh.
So he'd actually been friends with these 2 city council people. He's very upset. He's made threats to get a gun and go after a certain person in town there that was probably part of his demise. So they go over, they get in the house with him. This is 2:30ish in the afternoon. He lives on a corner house right beside the elementary school.
Oh, Lord.
And so we jump in cars. We're headed out. They're getting the SWAT team out. And I'm calling the city manager day 3 with this man. And I tell him what's going on. And, of course, he's in disbelief. And he says, Tom, call the commander. Coconino County Sheriff's Office covered that area. Of course, their home base is in Flagstaff. They had a substation in Page. Call the local commander. Tell him what's going on. Turn this over to them. With all my years in law enforcement at that point, having been on both sides, police department, sheriff's office, I felt like I was riding at that point. I was riding out what my tenure in Page would be.
Yep.
And thinking, would I want to get the call dumping this in my lap?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, I'm going to start right off the bat on the wrong foot with the sheriff's office. I know it's our thing. It's our responsibility. It's in the city limits. And so we get to the scene. I get briefed there. We've got a perimeter set up. Of course, there's parents angry now because the school's in lockdown situation.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's all our fault. And this is before we really, we'd had Columbine in a couple incidents, but not a lot of active shooter incidents at that point. This is in 2003. And I did call the sheriff's office. We got them to work the outer perimeter. We had our own SWAT team, and a sergeant that was on there had a taser from Taser International that happened to be in Scottsdale at the time, their headquarters. And that's why we had more of the tasers, is when they first started putting them out.
The M26, the black ones.
Yes.
Yep.
And we had one, and this sergeant had it. So the game plan was we waited a couple hours. Negotiations, talks broke down with him. Last we knew, he was in a fetal position at his fireplace with a gun in his hand. So we made the decision to go in. We did. The sergeant tasered him. Of course, then we took him into custody. Made national news at the time. When I went to the FBI National Academy in 2006, that was kind of the talk of the academy when I first got there, because some of the FBI folks that were instructing there had heard about that incident.
Yeah.
But us keeping charge of that situation, following through with it, it earned me points with the city manager, with the council, with the community, because 3 days there I was willing to step up to the plate and make the crucial decision to do what we did. And, of course, that could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
Someone could have been hurt or killed.
Yeah, but that's a hostage rescue. Your matrix goes up and you start punching doors and
Right. And I think, honestly, part of the time I was thinking, I had a young family at the time.
Yeah.
2 boys in school, wife. I'm thinking, boy, if this goes bad, I'm going to pack my stuff up that's not even unpacked yet and head back to Texas, I guess. But I feel going into this sheriff's race that to be a sheriff, an effective sheriff in the 21st century, you can't worry about winning the next election. If you're going to do what's right and you're going to support your folks that are out there working hard, trying to do the right thing. Now, we will make mistakes. People are human. They make mistakes. And when we make a mistake, we're going to be out front. We're going to let folks know. We're going to learn, grow, and move on from there. But you've got to want to do the right thing. You can't worry about losing your job or winning the next election.
Right.
You've got to, and that's one thing that I think Gary Painter always did, is to the best of his ability, he tried to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That was one of the reasons why I think so many people trusted him, and I'm glad you have that philosophy, was because in generally speaking, and there have been, as far as Midland Police Department goes too, we've had certain chiefs that when something went wrong or a mistake was made by the department, they were the first ones to go out and say, here was the mistake we made. Here's what we put in plan to make sure that doesn't happen again, and it actually goes a long way toward keeping the public trust.
Yes.
The worst thing you can do as a police officer or as a department head or as a police chief or a sheriff is try to hide something from the public when something goes wrong. Yeah.
I will say you've got to instill that in all your people.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing.
That has to be the culture of the agency.
Yes.
Right.
You know, if that's not instilled right down to the booking clerk, you're going to fail.
Amen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to get through your resume because I'm digging the war stories, but I want to hear all this because, like I said, I looked it up and read it. And so after Arizona.
Well, while I was in Arizona in 2006, the first quarter of 2006, I went to the FBI National Academy. And something I was really proud of, that was Class 224.
Okay.
And I know we've got a lot of local officers here that have at some point been through the National Academy.
I was completely shafted out of the National Academy.
Oh.
I'll never get over it. But I'm sorry, Chief. You go right ahead.
So I went to the National Academy, went back, and in about 2007, maybe late 2006, all of our families out here. And our older son graduated. He's moving to Odessa, to live in Odessa.
Right.
Our youngest son tells us, and he was a sophomore at the time, when I graduate, I'm moving back to Midland, Odessa. And at the time, my wife is like, you need to start finding a job back in Midland, Odessa, because these boys aren't going to live out there without me.
Right.
So 2008, UTPB opened up. I put in for it and was lucky enough to
Well, we're glad
get
to
on
have
there.
you back. I'm trying to remember all of my the FBI story. At one time, it was sergeant and above. You had to be to get in there. What the FBI considered a sergeant.
Right.
It moved to lieutenant.
Yes.
And I was a sergeant. And so I was begging and pleading and offering humiliating things to say, hey, look, I know my rank is sergeant, but I'm a SWAT commander, which is a rankless job. Could somebody sprinkle some fairy dust and say the SWAT team is led by a lieutenant? Like for 3 months and don't tell anybody. And nobody would do it. And I never got over that. I was so mad. It wasn't Painter's fault. It wasn't the department's fault. It was just the change. And I still, but, which leads me to another question. This is a difficult election for me, and I'll tell you why. Is I like everyone in it, and I know everyone in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was David Kreiner's supervisor when he came over to the sheriff's office. And Rory has been my supervisor, and we were buddies on SWAT, and we did all that stuff together. But I cannot imagine, on top of that, I mean, that makes it difficult for a voter. But the climate that you guys are in, and let me try to get through this. When Painter passed away, I was dealing with my whole medical thing, and we all felt the loss, so we were wondering what was coming next. And then it became controversial because of the decision to put Richard Gillette in. And being internal and kind of in the middle and seeing all those things and experimenting it, I understood it. I knew what was going on, and it was tough. And then I think it was on Facebook. I think somebody wrote a message on a post on Facebook and wrote a letter to Commissioner's Court about problems within the sheriff's office. And I remember promotion structure and some other things, and I'm like, yeah, they kind of know some of the problems there, and it's not like, it's a disaster that's collapsing, but yeah, they're in touch with it. Those are the kind of things that sort of encouraged me to move on. Because I was at a dead end. I was going to be a sergeant for a long time, and I heard all that, and I thought, wow, I wonder who that is. Oh well. So I get up the next morning, and there's a lady on a radio show, talk radio show, caller that says, if you believe all that, and if you have anything to say negative about the operation of the agency, then you're just a communist. Wow, that's crazy. And then I get back on Facebook, and the county judge is offering a reward for the identity of the person who said that. And I thought, wow.
So wait, he was offering a reward to dox that person?
Yeah, some guy.
Whoa.
And it was obviously a vague name. I forgot what it was. And he was in, I want to say, a gamer culture of some kind.
Okay.
And I don't know what he said. It was deleted before I saw it. And I've never seen the commissioner's letter. I just remember when I did see it before it was deleted, it sounded like somebody that had worked there and wasn't happy with the way things work out. And, some of the reasons I left.
Wow.
I was not going to promote beyond where I was, because the number of slots were slow and the way that the promotional system worked around. And yeah, he was asking for that. I thought, wow, this is getting crazy. What's it like running in this current environment?
Quite an atmosphere to be running for office in. Imagine.
It is. I'm like you. I've known all these guys for several years. It's difficult. You can tell by the lack of word. I never lacked for anything to say.
We didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
it's difficult. Sheriff Painter ran that agency almost the whole time I've been in law enforcement. I started in 1984. He was elected in 1985.
Yeah. I was not even in high school when he was elected to that office.
Yeah. And including me, I believe if you grow up, you start out in patrol, kind of like Seth Herman, the chief at Midland PD.
I was his sergeant too at the sheriff's office.
Right. He's come up through the ranks. But I think that there's some difficulty there when you run the operation the entire 30-some-odd. You didn't come up through the ranks. You've been the head duck, the man in charge for that many years. I can tell you that the policy manual at Midland Sheriff's Office is from 1985.
Yeah, I have a copy of it. That was always my thing. We had
the general orders and wow.
When I retired, I was, in fact, when I was clearing out my desk, when I retired and was coming home, I found that, and I looked through it, and I thought it references buildings and facilities that no longer exist. Like the only mentions of jail was the courthouse, and
wow,
yeah, it was, and that's how it was for a long time.
So an opportunity to update policies, procedures, and technologies
in the 21st century, with all the civil liability. You've got to have an up-to-date policy manual.
Yes.
It protects the county. It protects the officers. And then if you do have an officer that steps outside that safe zone, you need to be able to deal with that.
Yeah. And you need to be able to say, here's the policy he went against. Yeah, I can imagine that, especially in any sort of a civil or criminal situation, it's really bad for a department to say, we don't have a policy for that.
My wife is a contract director, and she deals obviously with contracts, and this is in kind of an oil field related business. But there's an old school line of thinking that if you bind yourself to a policy, you're opening liability. And in my career in law enforcement, that is completely reversed.
Right.
In fact, we would be denied certain grants if we didn't institute a policy, and they would even give you a policy. Look, if you don't have a policy on this, work off of this.
Right.
And if you sign to these minimum standards, you'll do it. And we had a lot of trouble getting stuff through that way. So that's cool.
Yeah, with an updated policy manual, it protects the county, it protects the employee, it protects the supervision there, because you know as well as I do, having been a supervisor, if a troop does something, that sergeant will be sued, that lieutenant will be in, right on up the line to the chief or the sheriff.
It rolls downhill, as they say.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
And, mine is not to have a policy manual so you could target people. Mine is a policy manual that protects everyone, the county, the employees.
It creates a stronger department.
I have found that creates a culture, not having it, and some of the things where people are going to work every day trying not to get in trouble. And I remember that, in trouble, when I was a sergeant, and I remember somebody saying, well, you'll get in trouble. And I go, what does that mean? Tell me what that means. Well, we'll come, they'll come after you. And I go, I'm they. Why am I going to come after you? I'm your sergeant. I am they.
Right.
And it's strange what that creates. And then when you put it down, especially in this day and age, when you refine a solid policy, especially a proven policy, because when you get into things like tasers, less lethal and all that, there's a lot of battleground in that's been fought all along the way, that if you do it this way and you train it this way and all, it's solid. Right. It's actually insurance.
Exactly. Not only that, but you've got an up-to-date policy manual. You hold your employees responsible for knowing what's in that manual. You make it part of the promotional process, which needs to be fixed also.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about being stuck as a sergeant. When a department's led by the same person for so long, sometimes blind loyalties exist. And, when you don't have a clear-cut promotional process policy,
right,
where, in my mind, we need an oral review board, we need a written exam, and an assessment center.
Can you
to promote people?
I have
that
never
way, because
that's
let
basically
me
like
make this-
is it like the civilian version of like an employee performance evaluation?
I
that
have
sort of
never
thing?
understood the difference between those two, and I'm so glad you're here to tell me about that, because I had to study accreditation in college, and that was mentioned, and to this day I couldn't answer a test question right. Can you kind of break those down for us?
Well, for one, as sheriff, I shouldn't have direct hands-on with promotions. We should put these folks through a process. Number one, you take a written exam. We take that score. You have an oral board, and that oral board shouldn't just consist of Midland County sheriff's folks. That oral board should consist of somebody from Midland Police Department, someone from Odessa Police Department, bring in someone from Abilene PD, close-in folks, supervisors that know what they want in a troop.
That's a peer review. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, peer review.
And you bring them in, you have them sit on the board. You can do assessment type things where you run scenarios and things by these folks, and they've got to work through these processes. And you take all those scores, because I realize some people, when I say written tests, are going to go, oh my gosh, I don't take written tests well. You average that with the rest of these scores.
Right.
And then you come out and you have a ranking. Who's number one? Who's number two? Who's number three? For me, as a police chief or a sheriff, either one, if I have somebody that's not competent, doesn't have the ability to supervise and lead people, he does me or she does me no good. And that's the other thing. You want to be fair in the process of how many males you have, how many females you have.
Wow. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
You want to promote people based on their ability to do the job, not based on who's been here for 20 years or who my good friend is.
Yeah.
If you've got someone here that's been around 20 years and he's a corporal, and some people want to be lifelong corporals.
Yeah, they want to stay there.
Some people don't want to promote,
yeah.
and that's okay. But you shouldn't promote a 20-year corporal because there's a connection and pass over someone that has been there 10 years that has really proven him or herself.
I think, and again, I'm not talking about, I don't want to sound like I think the sheriff's office is sinking or anything else. I was there for a long time, and I continue to work with them at the DA's office. It's not a sinking boat, but there's a couple of bilge pumps on.
Yeah. There's some leaks, and the bilge pumps are running. Yeah.
But I looked around at a lot of the guys that left, and essentially all of us were people that were interested in what you're saying, in innovation and changing. And we were met by just an inversion layer of old school, it stops here. This is the way it is.
We've done it this way for 90 years. We're going to do it this way for 90
Institutional
more.
inbreeding.
Yes.
That's who's the Pat McNamara.
Yeah,
says
Pat
that.
McNamara.
Pat McNamara said that in terms of training and shooting is institutional inbreeding. We've always done it that way, and I saw a lot of that. And the problem is, one of the things, and I want your opinion on this. I heard it from somebody else, from Cliff Sykes, a dear friend. The only reason he's not here is he's still employed. He can't say half the crap I'm going to say about government. But where was I going with this? There is a trend in law enforcement where we are recruited, we're brought into the fold based on our ability to develop courage. Now, and I'm a career-long instructor, and I can teach you courage in the sense that I can say, if you do this, these are your chances of survival. It increases. If you do this, you're never going to lose. If you study this, so when a person goes, wow, and they get in their first fight and they handle it right, and they get in their first car chase, and they go, oh, this training works. That's courage. That's what actually built it. You don't just come in being 10 foot tall and bulletproof. Those aren't the guys we want in law enforcement, but we train it into you. And what happens next, now that guy's a supervisor. So now he has all this physical courage, but not necessarily the emotional courage to lead.
Right.
So when you get some snotty-nosed sergeant like me that's a young guy that comes up and says, hey, we need to change this. And they go, we don't do that. We don't change that way. And so you create that, we call it in flying the inversion layer, where the temperature meets and all the crap settles, when you take off in an airliner and you've got that just layer of dust. Right. And so a guy hits that inversion layer, and I'm sitting here tapping my fingers, and I go, I can get $15,000 a year more if I go over there. So boom, there you go. And, it's happened with a lot of people. So that's my 2 cents. Am I close? Does that sound?
Yes. We've got to find a way to give these folks incentive to stay at Midland County Sheriff's Office. Obviously, the city has deeper pocketbooks than the county does in most cases. They pay better. And that's always been that way. And I in my experience has been most cities do pay better than most counties do. Not always, but a lot of times.
And then complain about fat deputies and all that because they want, if you want performance, you pay for it. Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of what I dealt with at UTPB to start with. But if these folks can see that their hard work and their dedication at some point will pay off, and you don't have to be best friends with whoever's in charge.
Right.
You can be promoted based on your merit. That will help retain employees. My goal is we're going to treat the public fairly, with dignity and respect. And you have to do the same thing with your employees. Fair, dignity, and respect.
That's beautiful. That's all I would ask for. That would make me stay somewhere.
Right. And I want to throw this in there. I've never worked for Midland County. I've never worked for the sheriff's office. I'm impartial.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only viable candidate that's impartial.
Interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is. I never thought of it that way.
You've got one that currently works for the sheriff's office. You've got another one that did work for the sheriff's office and still works for the county. I'm coming in, fresh eyes, fresh new ideas, have run 2 other agencies, was second in charge in a 3rd agency, been to the FBI National Academy. I've been in upper level management for the last 20 years.
That's powerful. I mean, I don't know what else to say because that's when I came in a couple of times to different positions. I'll give you an example. I came into a sergeant position, and an employee walked into the office while I'm trying to find a place to put all my crap, and they signed a piece of paper and told me they were going to go, I think, up front and have a smoke. Why the hell are you telling me this? I said, well, the previous sergeant, we had to sign out, tell them where they were. And I said, I can't keep up with that. If you make it a problem, I'll make it a problem. But other than that, be responsible.
Right.
You're a grown-ass person. Just go away. You do that. You know your smoke breaks. If it becomes a problem, you don't want to deal with me. Other than that, we're cool. And that was such a cultural change. Nobody knew what to do with it because I didn't want to micromanage. I had bigger fish to fry. And then I quickly learned how the culture was, and I had certain people that were issues, and we eventually sanded that down. And I wound up with the 20-year corporal that wanted to be a 20-year corporal, and the dude was awesome. He was great. He didn't want to do anything else. I'm like, man, you should be putting for sergeant. Hell no, I don't want your job. And he did a fantastic job of that corporal, and you have to put that. But then again, you wind up with people that just all they do is manage to not get fired, and you would be competing with that, no matter what your experience and level was. That was one of the things that led me to kind of look elsewhere. We dealt with a lot of that.
Right. Well, the department needs a leader that will be accountable, and he'll hold people accountable.
That's yeah. I guess
agreed. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. I've always seen huge issues with the transparency with some of the other law enforcement agencies, with the commissioner's court. Some of us can think back years ago where there was really no relationship between the sheriff's office and the commissioner's court.
When it was adversarial, I mean, when they were really going at us.
Right.
And yeah.
In my philosophy and the transparencies, not just with the employees, with the citizens, but with the commissioner's court, with the district attorney's office, with Midland Police Department, with Odessa law enforcement, we've all got to work together, and nothing is a big secret. You know, if we're, I know there are certain cases you work in you can't discuss with the commissioner's court. But most things that the agency's doing on a day-to-day basis, if the county judge asks about it or one of the commissioners asks about it, you can share that information with them.
Right. Yeah. You should be able to. There are definitely those cases.
And certainly with the prosecutor's offices around here, with the JPs, with the district attorney's office, you should have a good rapport with them. The DA, a JP, anyone should feel like I can pick up the phone, call the sheriff, and that person will be responsive. He'll listen to me.
We saw that a lot. We just call us back. And I heard this is the best way I can explain all of the conflict in law enforcement. And I used to explain this in the class. Here's where we have our failures. Is you have the SO, and we're with the SO. And screw those guys and screw those guys. Not the PD, not the DPS. We're the SO. We're it. And you go down to your next level. Yeah, patrols, we're it, man. Those patrol detectives, they don't know anything else.
Then it's just the guys in my squad.
Yeah,
we're the guys.
Yeah, then it's just my crew. And then it's, Tom and I pull all the load. Tim's a screw off. And we do that. And then we do that within agencies. And I've had people come up to me and say, man, you're a DA investigator. Why don't you do that? Well, because you hold half the evidence on that. You have to build on that, not me originate it. And you're already a witness. Don't make our office the witness. And little things like that. And the DA's office is out to get us. No, we want to win the case, and we need solid information, and I've fought with dear friends over stuff like that. And I'm like, well, the guy said, and I go, I just need a report. I've had to let cases go as a sergeant and as an investigator because we didn't have a report. Just wouldn't do it. People would not write it down. They would say, okay, Tom, well, here's the murderer's eyeglasses in his notebook confessing to all of it. I'm out of here. And I'm going to say, Tom, where's Matt's report on this? We need that because he's the one that originated it. And when that falls short, and it's not, any one agency, but that creates this us against them thing that doesn't really exist.
Right.
We're all working within the law, and that's how it should be.
Right.
So,
well, that's one of the reasons I have a goal of putting together 2-3 tenured, trained investigators, pulling out some of these cold cases, some of the person crimes. You can't pull out my tire was slashed or my windshield was broke. Persons crimes, aggravated assaults, sexual assaults, murders, missing people that have never been found.
Right.
Pull these cases out, put them in front of a trained investigator that cares, have them look at some of these cases and see if we can't solve some of these things that have been sitting for years.
Yeah. I can tell you, man, the caseloads are they're all unbelievable, and that does need to be done. And I want to see also cases reach an end, not just be shoved under a desk or be lost forever. I have seen that. I've had to do audits and seen that firsthand, that somebody needs to be accountable for that case from beginning. Even if, like I tell people, and I would tell my investigators, I would tell them, look, even if your report is, Mr. Kreitz, I'm sorry that your windshield's broken with a rock and your ex-girlfriend's horrible. We're kind of done there because she's not talking to us. We don't have anywhere to go. Here's your case number if your insurance needs it. But that's the citizen that's getting an end to things, even if they don't agree with it, other than it just disappearing. Because especially if you need that later, it's all there. But that's fantastic. I don't really have a whole lot more questions. What else could we get into?
One thing I want to cover before we run out of time is the jail.
Oh yeah. We didn't even get to that. Yeah.
Everyone would tell you the jail is a disaster. High turnover rate with employees.
Yeah.
There have been suicides in the jail that have not been released to the media over the years.
I have heard that. Yes.
That's part of the transparency. And I'm not insinuating that anyone did anything wrong or hurt anyone or anything in the jail, but when somebody hurts themselves in the jail and then they go to the hospital and they pass away 2 or 3 days later, that occurred in the jail. That happened in the jail. That's an in-custody incident.
Yes. I teach that class.
Yes.
Yeah, I taught that class. Yeah.
We need to be putting that out to the media.
Wow.
This happened. This person injured himself, been sent to the hospital in critical condition. The person passes away 2 or 3 days later. You need to come back to that. Tell the public this person passed away. Because what happens, even though he did this at his own hands, nobody did anything to him. There's no conspiracy theory there.
Right.
People will make up their own
still looks
conspiracy
bad.
theory
Yeah.
when you didn't put it out there.
We have a whole series of podcasts dedicated to if you let people in a position where they can believe in a conspiracy theory, there's a percentage of them that are going to every single time. Yeah.
So the community has my commitment. If I'm elected sheriff, we're going to be transparent, not only in patrol and in CID and what the licensed peace officers do, but what happens in the jail. If there's a sexual assault in the jail, an employee has sex with an inmate in the jail,
right,
that needs to go out to the media. Somebody commits suicide, somebody attempts it and is seriously injured, that needs to go out to the public.
Honestly say, and I remember all the names, I worked a sexual assault in the jail, and the media release never went out. The media release that I turned in.
Right.
I remember that. I'm not speaking ill upon the sheriff. I don't know who made that call, but it was made, and I was upset by it.
But that's what I said earlier. Right. You've got to drill this into everyone, right down to your booking clerk.
It has to be your culture.
It's got to be the culture that we're going to be up front and we're going to tell the public. We're going to be out there. And, I don't pretend to make everyone think that the sheriff knows every little thing, or the chief, whatever agency it is, that the sheriff or the chief knows every little thing that happens in their agency. But you're relying on your staff to inform you and keep you informed and keep you briefed.
The thing about the jail and the whole culture of the jail, and I've taught in jails for a long time, is whatever goes on in the jail is unrelenting. The jail never lets up. It's a constant line in and a constant line out. It's not like when I was in patrol and I could drive out 20 miles south of town, check out for my lunch break, eat a sandwich, and look at the stars. That never goes away, and it's perpetual. And if you have a weakness in your culture, a weakness in your policy, it's going to get big in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Because of that, if you're not writing up injuries, that was one of them I had a hard time getting people to do. If you slam your finger in a door and you bruise your pinky, write it up. We just need to know that. Oh no, Sarge, I don't want to. I'm not going to send you to the hospital. You're not going to get called in. I just need you to write it down. It's an insurance thing. It's years later, and even in the oil field, that's impossible because it's so perpetual and so oft occurring. Right. So. But I do think there needs to be a culture shift.
Right.
We've all seen that.
So I guess my message is to the community, I think for the most part people are ready for change. And I don't mean just in the sheriff's office. I think people in Midland are ready for change.
We are. Yes.
Politically ready for change. I think we probably proved that with the mayor election. And some of the city council folks.
We did with the selection of chief. I want to see actual cooperation. I want to see departments get together and fix things. I'm tired of they're out to get us. Those guys don't like us. They're out to get us. Like, no, we're not. We're not turning the best work to those guys.
No. That's my other commitment is transparency, fairness, treating people right, and working with other agencies, having open door policies. I believe we can save taxpayers money by working together. we can fight crime better on a daily basis if we're sharing information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Needless to say, being able to talk to each other will go a long way.
Yeah, that will be when us and the controlling agencies, the courts and all that can do it. So this is just a shot in the dark and a question we have not discussed. But every time an election came up, we were told to vote for so-and-so because we're all going to get fired and he's hiring his cousins. Has that gone around yet that you've heard of?
I've heard that. I've heard that.
Yeah. I don't know in what world that's actually practical with a force of maybe over 6 people, 7 maybe. Right. I don't have that many cousins. I was just curious if that's come around.
Yeah. It's a lot of stories, rumors, and gossip are being slung around right now.
Yeah.
Not just with the sheriff's race, but a lot of the races.
I'm even out of the loop and retired, and it's still that particular one I was just asking about because it always came around.
Right.
Even when Painter was a shoe-in, I had people coming in, hey man, we need to put out a sign. I'm like, I'm not gonna put out a sign. I live in an apartment. Right. Well, you could put one in your window. All right, whatever. Because if so and so gets hired, they're firing everybody. And yeah.
Well, I will tell you, if I'm elected, I'm not going in to fire everyone. Your common everyday employee will be fine. Everyone's going to come in and adjust.
Right.
The top 1 or 2 positions. Any sheriff or any chief that comes in is going to adjust the top 1 or 2 below him or above him. Below him. And I'll do that. I'm probably looking at 2, maybe 3 people to switch out.
Right.
And we'll move on and do good things. Line officers, jail folks, these stories that, somebody comes in and whoever it is going to clear half the place. There's not even any way possible you could do that.
Right.
Yeah. I had to write a paper on in college one time on what it costs to produce a patrol sergeant.
Right.
Like from the time the dude walks in, I think I want to be a cop, until he is wearing 3 stripes in a car and checking reports. Yeah. That's expensive. Well, that's not something that's even doable.
Matt, I'm even willing to go out on the limb here and tell you, I already know who my chief deputy will be.
Right.
And it's Ronnie Aaron.
Oh, wow.
Well, we have a soft spot for Ronnie Aaron.
Ronnie's been on this podcast.
But that's how transparent and open I am to this. I've not promised anyone else a job, anyone else a position. He will be the chief deputy if I'm elected. I challenge my opponents to name who their chief deputies will be.
I will. I'm going to say this about Ronnie Aaron, and we probably need to step it up before we out-talk our batteries. Ronnie and I have been friends since 5th, 6th grade. Long time. And we kind of followed each other through. We didn't really work together super close until the DA's office. And a lot of my training later in my career is intelligence based and how to develop and process and use intelligence and different data. And I could stub my toe and Ronnie would know about it before I did. There's some magic in that guy in how he knows everything and how everyone talks to him. Mm-hmm. And it's phenomenal. And he's not a blabbermouth. He's not any of that stuff. But if the guy comes in, he'll say, hey, man, you might want to do this because this is about to go down. Wow, really? And he is he's an actual leader and actually understands the workflow. Right. That's going to be really cool. I'm glad to hear that. And it's fascinating to me that you say it because promotions, transfers, all that stuff at the sheriff's office are closely guarded secrets.
Yes.
When I went to the DA's office, a person would announce that they're leaving, and the next day it would say, farewell to Tom. He's retiring and moving to Bermuda. Congratulations to Tim for taking his place. Please welcome our new junior prosecutor, Matt Vann, who's moved here from Bolivia and went to such and such school. It'd be the next day. And so to not have that kind of sort of shroud of mystery is very valuable. So fantastic. Very good. Well, Chief, is there anything you would like to say that we haven't gotten to? Again, we're going to out-talk our batteries, which is our problem.
I just want to thank folks that have supported me. I've met a lot of really neat people, just like the two of you, over the last few weeks.
Thank you.
A lot of good people in Midland and Midland County. I want to thank those folks. If anyone would like to make a campaign donation, because this advertising
not
and the
cheap.
Signs are expensive, more than I thought. You can send donations to Tom Hain for Sheriff, and that's Hain, P.O. Box 50811. And, of course, that's Midland, Texas, 79710.
Fantastic. Is that your campaign card? If you'll leave that, I will scan it, and I will put it up here at the end of the podcast. Chief, we very much appreciate you coming here. And, I am honored that you asked to be on this podcast, and we're going to put it out locally. And friends that are watching, we're going to put the information up here, the address and all the campaign information. I am working with a lot of local politicians, people running for different offices, doing recording stuff since I'm retired, and I'm doing a lot of things, and I'm amazed at how much money you guys have to spend.
Right.
Just for a local office. Not that it's nothing, but when you start dealing with congressmen and all that with the bigger districts, it's costing a fortune. Some of them are up to $1.8 million for D11 in contributions. So pick one, support it. We're going to put this out everywhere we can. Give us likes and shares. Always, we're a podcast, so we're attention whores. And very much, Tim, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks
Chief,
for asking
especially
me.
you. We enjoyed it. And we're going to shut down before we run out the batteries. So cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Sheriff, with whatever you got left there. Fantastic. Thank you guys for watching.
See you guys
we'll be
next
back
time.
around.
Thank you.